if we were connected to our gut feelings, there's a lot of things we wouldn't be choosing. A lot of things we wouldn't buy that we don't need. A lot of people we wouldn't follow who are actually not authentic themselves. So the big way that society survives is by people disconnect from their gut feelings. So that's what I mean by it's an essential part of our social character is to be disconnected from ourselves. And the society wants us to be disconnected. We don't respond to what happens. We respond to our perception of what happens.
Right.
Okay? That's what the Buddha said. It's with our minds we create the world. When you reframe things and you actually see the source within ourselves, all of a sudden, that's liberating. Because guess what? If you're feeling that way because this guy did this or didn't do that, that makes you a victim.
Yeah.
But if you see that you're the source, now you're powerful.
What your wish for humanity is?
Oh, freedom. People need freedom. They need freedom to be themselves. Freedom. If I actually did a workshop here in LA, I participated in it maybe 5-6 years ago, and the theme was, what is your calling? And by calling, I didn't mean what profession you choose. What calls you? And when you leave the earth, or when you return to the earth, what would you have wanted to have contributed? So I really got that my calling is that people are free. And so this book, it's all about liberating people, or helping people liberate themselves, put it that way. Freedom politically, freedom economically, freedom socially, freedom from their unconscious emotions, so they can be themselves. I think that's my desire for human beings is freedom. You know, and that's, I think, the essential endeavor of all the great work that's been done in the world, is the desire for freedom.
What does happiness mean to you?
Really, it means the capacity to play and to be in the present moment. And you know, the kids, when kids play, they don't worry about the appropriately. They don't worry about the war wherever or climate change. They're just playing in the moment. They're fully present to themselves in imaginative, almost hypnotically imaginative states. So happiness just means being in the present and being allowed to be, no matter what, to have the capacity to play. How long does any creature in nature survive if they're not in touch with their gut feelings? So that being in touch with our bodies and our emotions is essential also. Terrific. But what happens is, if for the sake of fitting with the family or with the culture that doesn't particularly support our authenticity, we have to give up our connection to ourselves, our authenticity, for the sake of attachment. Then being inauthentic, being out of touch with ourselves, is how we survive. We're afraid to be ourselves because we associate being ourselves with a threat of being rejected. And so this means that for the rest of our lives, we're going to be in relationships where we're afraid to be ourselves, to really say what it feels like for us. Now that has terrific implications. When I say terrific, I mean significant implications. When there was purpose and meaning in my life, how did I feel? As compared to when I was doing things that were basically meaningless and didn't come from my authentic self. When I'm doing work, when I engage in activities that express who I genuinely am, and I find a sense of meaning in it, which is to say that what I'm doing makes a difference in the world, or just how I'm showing up makes a difference in the world. Fundamentally, we're connected creatures. Our brains are connected to each other. Our physiology is connected to each other. So when we engage in activities that serve that connection in one way or the other, we find meaning. Love is supposed to be a two-way valve. It's supposed to flow in both directions. When it only flows towards others and you ignore your own needs, then you're taking on way too much stress in this life, and it's going to tell on your health. So nothing wrong with loving others. We're meant to do that. But when we're loving others by chronically suppressing our own needs, where we are always afraid of disappointing others, where our own needs are compulsively ignored, that's a quick route to disease. The social character is the personality traits that a society would seek to inculcate in its members in order to keep itself going. I've sort of updated that. Now, in Huxley's Brave New World, people are literally gestated in a test tube, and they're biochemically and environmentally trained and developed to fulfill certain roles and to be happy with those roles. Now, we're not gestated in test tubes, and we're not mechanically programmed like that, but almost like we were. Because as Huxley points out in The Brave New World, the thing is to want to do what society expects you to do. So that what we end up wanting to do has got nothing to do with our own particular needs or true nature. It has to do with what the society expects of us. We have this idea that what is normal is also healthy and natural. And I'm saying that in this culture, the norm is neither healthy nor is it natural. In fact, the norm, I think, is making us sick. Number one. Number two, we talk about illnesses and of body and mind as abnormalities. I'm saying that illness in this society, given the conditions, is a normal response to an abnormal circumstance. We don't respond to what happens. We respond to our perception of what happens, to our interpretation of what happens. Number one. Number two, of all the possible interpretations, we choose the worst one.
Yeah.
Number two. Thirdly, what I just said isn't true. We didn't choose it. It's not like you went through all these possibilities and you said...
It wasn't multiple choice and I chose option D.
Oh, no, he doesn't care about me. He doesn't respect me. You didn't do that. Your brain jumped there automatically, right? Mm-hmm. The question is why?
Yeah.
Now, here's the learning. First time in your life that you felt hurt and angry, that when you perceived somebody didn't care about you or didn't respect you? Or has it happened before?
This is where the exercise might go sideways. I'm going to hit pause on that. I think that's probably for more of a conversation number one.
But you'd probably agree it's not the first time.
It's not the first time.
Very good. And most people I talk to, it goes back way back.
Yeah, this goes way back.
Into childhood. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that's what trauma is. We don't respond to the present moment. We respond to the past. Now, but along the lines of our discussion, it's a beautiful learning opportunity. Now you get to know. Now, what if you assumed for a moment that you're the most lovable, most worthy of care, most worthy of respect person in the history of the universe, and this guy doesn't do your home? What's your response?
Any number of the other options which does not trigger an intense negative emotional state. Yeah. None of those other options would trigger that. So something in you, I would argue, still believes that you're not worthy of care and respect. Mm-hmm. And that's what gets triggered. So who's the one that doesn't care about you and who's the one that doesn't think you're worthy of respect? No, it'd be me.
It would be you.
Yeah.
No, that's a learning.
No, it is.
And this is exactly what you're talking about. You're saying how these difficult things, how these problems are always teaching opportunities. And that's the beauty of healing. There's all the social expectations that you should fit in and think like everybody else thinks, or dress like they all dress, or behave like they all behave. So there's all these pressures not to be yourself. And then what happens is you get sick because the pain of not being yourself is too much. So how do you get back to yourself? Well, the good news is that the self that you abandoned all those years ago, not deliberately, not consciously, and it was never your fault. But what happens is that self that you disconnected from, which is the essence of trauma, is the disconnection from yourself, that never went away. It's still there. And it's talking to you through your body. So it's a matter of learning how to pay attention. And at some point, you have a decision to make. As a child, I had no choice. When there was a conflict between attachment here, authenticity over here, I had to choose. I didn't even choose because it's not conscious. I had to go with the attachment. And yes, if I'm authentic, I may lose some of my attachments. Some people who really liked me before will not like me. So you lose the attachment. And you have a decision to make. What would you rather have? Who would you rather have in your life? Them or yourself? The addiction wasn't your problem. Your addiction was your attempt to solve a problem. And the real question is, how did that problem develop? How come it's 7 billion human beings in the world you felt lonely? How come you lacked a sense of agency, control, authority in your life? Why were you in so much emotional pain? And everything you've said, the loneliness, the lack of power, the lack of control, the anxiety, these are forms of emotional pain. So my mantra on addiction is not why the addiction, but why the pain. If the parents are in conflict with each other, there's a lot of stress, and the child just doesn't want to bother them with their own emotions. So now the child becomes the parent's emotional caregiver by suppressing their own feelings. So there's this conflict between attachment and authenticity. So in that conflict, attachment is going to win every time, and people suppress their authenticity. And specifically, if they weren't loved for who they are, they're going to work very hard to be liked. And if you want to be liked, just please everybody. Never say no, take everything on, be responsible for other people feel, never disappoint anybody. They're all going to like you, but nobody's going to love you because they don't know you. A child has a need. A child has an absolute need for what we call attachment. Attachment being the drive to be close to somebody so we can be taken care of. The human child being the most immature, helpless, underdeveloped, and for the longest period of time, creature in the universe. Our period of attachment is very, very long, but especially in the early years, it's absolutely indispensable. We just can't live with it, can't survive without attachments. No mammal can, but least of all can human beings. So we have this need to attach, to be close to people so they'll take care of us. That's obvious. We have another need, though, that evolution gave us, which is to be, as you said, authentic. And authentic is not some fancy new age spiritual state. It's actually feeling your gut feelings. It's absolutely essential. You can't afford a high-priced therapist. Can you afford to read a book from a library? Lots of great books out there. Can you go on YouTube and listen to people talk about finding yourself in trauma? Can you take a breath? Can you go on YouTube and find some breathing practices? Can you take a cold shower? Because taking a cold shower can make a huge difference to your nervous system. Can you take a walk? Can you look at a tree? Are there online groups that you could join where you could have useful conversations with people? I mean, there's a lot of stuff people can do.
So somebody will say, it won't work for me.
Then I'd say, who's saying that? Which part of you believes that it won't work for you? And yeah, I'm sure that you've had lots of disappointment, but which part of you is convinced? Well, the part that is convinced that it won't work for you is the part that was hurt so badly in childhood that you saw no way out. And you're still seeing it through the eyes of that child. I think chronic regret is debilitating. It's a lack of self-forgiveness. It's also kind of egotism. It's quite something to recognize. I do recognize that some of the way I parented my kids, the way I showed up, I've often talked about this on your program too, wasn't the best for them, but it was the best I could do at the time. So it's not the question of justifying anything, but it's also not dwelling on the past. Mm-hmm. Regret is to dwell on the past. And what's the point? It's quite something to recognize that I did things that, had I known differently, I would not have done the same way. That's just learning. Regret is an emotional state that values the past more than the present. And it accuses yourself of doing things for which you had no consciousness to do otherwise. So that's where I stand with regret. Yeah. That the capacity to be empathetic and to recognize the grief and to hold the grief does not obviate the capacity to be happy. One is not disloyal to the suffering in the world by allowing oneself to be happy. So there's no necessary contradiction. Yeah. And I've seen people on death row who, if they win their appeal, the best thing they can hope for is life in jail life in prison without parole, but they're happy. And how do they become happy? Meditation, working through their traumas, having remorse for what they did, connecting with other people, and just connecting with the present moment. So addiction is a bad thing, right? And it's a sin, or it's a mistake, or it's a bad choice, or it's a disease. It's none of that. When you ask people, when I give people my definition of addiction, which is a process that's manifested in any behavior that a person finds temporary relief or pleasure in, and therefore craves, suffers negative consequences in the long term, but doesn't give up despite negative consequences. So it's craving relief, pleasure in the short term, negative consequence long term, inability or refusal to give it up. That's what an addiction is. Drugs, sex, gambling, eating, I don't care what. Look at the word depression. What does it mean to depress something? It means to push it down. What do we push down? We push down our emotions. Why do we push them down? Because it's too dangerous to feel them when they would threaten the attachment relationship. So the pushing down of healthy anger can lead you to autoimmune disease or cancer, neurological disease like ALS. And by the way, you know something? They've done studies. Even with people with ALS who express anger, they live longer than people with ALS who don't express anger. Now, at the heart of all addictions, there's tremendous shame. The addicted individual or individuals, whether they admit it or not, are really ashamed of themselves. So shame shows up in all kinds of ways, and it's a barrier to self-knowledge, because when we're ashamed, we're inclined to protect and to hide. And it's not helpful. In either direction, it's not helpful. We have this expression in English that says you should be ashamed of yourself. Well, examine that for a moment. Nobody should be ashamed of one's self. And there's a distinction between being ashamed of what you do and what you've done and who you are and what you are.
You can't look at what's wrong with the addiction. You have to look at what's right about it. In other words, what is the person getting from the addiction? What are they getting that otherwise they don't have? And what addicts get are relief from pain. What they get is a sense of peace, a sense of control, a sense of calmness, very, very temporarily. And the question is, why are these qualities missing from their lives? What happened to them? Now, if you look at the drugs like heroin, like morphine, like codeine, if you look at cocaine, if you look at alcohol, these are all painkillers. One way or another, they all soothe pain. And that's what the real question in addiction is, not why the addiction, but why the pain.
If you come to me with depression, I might decide that temporarily it might be a good idea for you to be on antidepressants, but it's not enough. Let's also look at what made you push down your feelings, what happened to you. Prescribing the antidepressant takes me 3 minutes.
Right.
Talking with you about what actually happened to you that made you push down your feelings, that takes a long time.
Right.
But no, most of the time, it's just the industrial model. You come in, I got 5 minutes with you, here's the prescription, goodbye.